Hello again. If we haven't met, my name is Ty. I use they, them pronouns. I'm making this video as a response to the tag Tarot 7 Connection, which was started by Marilyn from Tarot Clarity. Marilyn is one of my favorite channels here on TarotTube, and I have been recently just slowly making my way through all the responses in this tag because I have found the questions and obviously the answers that they elicit really interesting. So I know I'm a little bit late, but I'm going to jump on the bandwagon as well and answer these questions. And I thought while I was answering, I might do a flip through of a deck that I just recently got. This is the Mythic Tarot. There is a version called the New Mythic Tarot, which is really widely available. This is the original version with the old artwork, so it's a little bit harder to find and also sometimes kind of expensive. I've been looking for one for a while, but I recently managed to find one that was at a good price, so I snapped it up, and I'm going to be flipping through this one while I answer the questions. So let's get into it. Are there any types of readings you won't do? Why not? There are. The way that I answer this question is actually to say, I read about you and I'm not getting sued. So second half of that statement, pretty self-explanatory. I won't read about anything that could get me in legal trouble. So I'm not going to do medical diagnosis, legal advice, financial advice. I have been asked a few times to do sort of, investment advice. No, I won't do that. I won't read if someone is pregnant. I know that that's a fairly common question, but just makes me a bit uncomfortable because I acknowledge that I'm human, so I can make some mistakes. And if I make a mistake in that interpretation, it can be really devastating for the person who's asking the question. So it's just something that I prefer not to go into. However, the part about readings being about the querent is something that I sometimes have to negotiate a bit with people, because one of the most common questions that I seem to get, especially when I read online, has to do with what another person thinks or feels about the querent. So what we'd call a third-party reading. It's very popular. Nothing against people that do that, but it's not something that I am interested in doing. I used to try to sort of mold those questions and sort of make them a bit more comfortable for myself to read to when clients ask for that sort of thing. But these days I kind of just am fairly blunt about it, fairly straight up about it, that for one, we can't be sort of certain that it's accurate when we read the mind of another person. And for two, what are you going to do with that information? I don't ever think that it's actually a very helpful thing to do. I think it's always much more helpful to look at yourself and your options and things that you can have sort of control over, as opposed to what someone else might or might not think or feel. So that's my line. Question 2 is there any tarot card you identify with the most? Which is it? So I think it changes all the time. Sometimes the Hermit. That's certainly an energy that I feel very at home in, you could say. The only Virgo placement I have in my chart is Venus. I don't know enough about astrology to interpret that, but does that make me a hermit? Oftentimes I relate to basically all of the court cards of the cups. Sometimes I'm a real Knight of Cups type. Sometimes I'm a King of Cups. Sometimes I'm a Queen of Cups. But probably the one that is most consistent, and sorry to give the cliche answer, but as a Scorpio, I think I have the right to say the Death card. I think I love what it represents for starters, the idea of transitions and cycles and all that, things ending, all that good stuff. But also, I think the Death card is a bit misunderstood. We have kind of inexperienced people dreading seeing it in their reading and going, oh no, the Death card, that looks bad. And I'll be honest, I have felt that way sometimes, like that people have received me personally in that same manner. So I just relate. Also, I oftentimes, in most decks, find the artwork on the death card to be very engaging. So it's always an interesting one to come up in readings. Question 3. Is there any reading that you've ever done that either gave you the chills or impressed you? And keep it anonymous. So, in the least arrogant way possible, I'm going to say this basically happens every time. So more often when I have client readings, but also sometimes when I read for myself, there's always at least one thing that gives me a little, ooh, that was super accurate and super, gives me the chills. The first thing that comes to mind actually when I think of this question, there was an instance where the chills happened before even the reading. So the client sent me their question, and I think this is anonymous enough because only they will know if they hear this. And if you do, hello, I hope you're well. The client sent their question. It was just, who did it? It was a 3-word question, who did it? And I immediately had the hit that said their mother, like your mother. I went on, I did the reading, and all the cards that were coming out were like exactly pointing to their mother. So, Empress, Queen of Pentacles. So that was pretty interesting that it was all just affirming the hit that I had before I'd even begun the reading. Another one that I think of is I had a client who was working in an unrelated field and asking like what direction should they take in their career, and I kept getting cards that were implying like work with children, and I was like, are you thinking of changing careers? Are you wanting to work with children? And they were like, yes, actually I was thinking of moving into childcare, which was completely not at all like the career that they were in and like the information that they had told me. So there's often very accurate things happening in readings. Another fun thing that often happens is just astrology signs always come out, and that always impresses the querents. And for me, it almost is like a little bit like, oh, I sort of wish I hadn't even mentioned that sometimes, because they get really hung up on how impressive it is that I can sort of like, or tell them their sign or tell the sign of the person that they're interested in romantically or that kind of thing. But like, that's just what cards come out. I don't control that, I think my interpretation of the actual cards themselves is probably a bit more worth focusing on, but it's kind of a fun party trick, I guess you could say, that, people are always so impressed. Oh yes, I am a Gemini. That's cool. Question 4 is, which is your preferred system of tarot? So like Pip Style, Marseille, Thoth, Waite Colman Smith, Continental, any style. So my preferred style is Rider-Waite Smith, and that's just because A, that's what I've learned on, and B, that's the format that most of the tarot decks that I own follow. So I haven't ever really seen a deck with artwork that spoke to me enough in any of the other formats to sort of compel me to purchase it. And I really only buy decks that I really like the look of, or that something about them really intrigues me, and I just haven't happened to feel that way about any like Marseille deck that I've seen. That said, I don't think there's like anything necessarily better about the Rider-Waite Smith system. I know a lot of people get really detailed readings in other systems, but this is the one that I'm used to, and I'm not really sort of thinking about expanding much too soon. Question 5 is, do you prefer doing in-person readings, remote, or other types, and why? So I'm going to join the chorus of people whose answer is that they all have their benefits. So in person, I really like when a reading can be a conversation. We can sort of back and forth, and the client can tell me which parts of the reading are most relevant to them so that we can continue exploring those particular threads that are emerging together. I find that's a really effective way of reading. On the other hand, when you read via distance, you oftentimes have a lot more time to look at the reading and sit with it. When I do readings on Etsy, which is the main place that I've sold readings, I will sit and look at the reading for sometimes hours even, type things out. You can, type things in brief as you draw the cards, as you think of them, and then go back and like flesh them out and make it make more sense in a sort of written way, make it flow better, order your thoughts in a more sort of straightforward manner, which is quite a benefit, because sometimes when I read, I just get a lot of information all at once and I blurt things out, and perhaps at first blush it doesn't make a lot of sense. So having the chance to go back and edit is pretty helpful. There is also the benefit that having extra time, you can add in all those things that you might just think of after a certain period of time has passed about the reading. Because when you're sitting in front of someone and you have, half an hour, however long it might be, as soon as they walk away, I might think, oh no, I should have said X, Y, and Z. They're gone. Like, what can you do? Versus when you're reading via distance, oftentimes you can still have time to add in all those little details. Besides tarot, are there any other oracular systems you enjoy using? Which ones and why? Oh, yes. So, the first system that I ever learned was, I suppose you'd call it like bone throwing. I don't currently have a set of bones, but I do have some sort of charms and related things that I occasionally use in that manner. That is the first way that I was introduced to as a kid. And the second way I was introduced to was cup reading. So I still do that sometimes. I'm Greek, so I grew up seeing people in my family reading coffee cups. So that is what I do as opposed to tea. I also don't drink tea, but yeah, I can read coffee cups. And that's a really fun one, because just any time that you're having coffee with someone, you can be like, hey, do you want me to read your cup? You don't have to have brought any equipment with you. It's just a fun sort of thing you can do on the fly. And it's also a really good way to develop your intuition. You can read your own cup. If you drink coffee every day or tea, either or, it's just like a really good thing to do. So the next thing is other cartomancy systems. So I learned with playing cards when I was a kid, once again, but then my oldest deck that I own is actually an oracle deck that I got in 2001. So I suppose that's not the oldest deck that I own now, since this one is from the 80s, but it's the one that I've owned the longest, from 2001. So since then I've used oracle decks quite a lot, and I find that a very useful system of divination. I do augury, which is birds. I'm a pretty keen sort of bird watcher and bird enjoyer, so I have some books on ancient Greek methods of divination that involve, the movement of birds, and I have been developing my own systems of doing that. So that's something that I've been interested in lately. Like any self-respecting modern witch, I use pendulum. We all love pendulum. There was something else I thought of as well. Oh yeah, dreams. I don't know if that counts, but I quite often have fairly oracular dreams. So that's something that I try to take note of when it happens as well. The final question we have is, what solidified your connection with tarot? So tarot is probably actually, out of all the systems that I use, the one that I have the most recent connection to. Forgive the dimming of the light as the sun is setting here. So I only started tarot in probably 2017, something like that. So, someone do the maths for me. So like 7 or 8 years, something like that. Versus a couple of decades on all the others. But the thing that solidified it for me was learning the system of it. So I really like that it's got established suits and numbers and courts and all that sort of stuff, and that we have so many different interpretations of the theme of each one, but that they all follow the same structure. So you can get a tarot deck in any artwork, any format, they all follow that same structure. I learned on a really just the basic Waite Smith deck, and that was going okay, but it's when I bought my first sort of non-traditional, I suppose you could say, when I bought my first non-traditional deck, which was the 8 Coins Tattoo Tarot, that it really like clicked into place for me. And then being able to collect decks as a kind of way of collecting artwork also really solidified that connection for me. I think the design of the tarot basically exhibits almost everything that there is in human experience. So, you know, when you have an oracle deck, it's only whatever cards the author thought were important to include, versus I feel like a tarot deck, you can basically find every emotion, every event, every relationship that we know of sort of in our human society. You can find it all in a tarot deck. And so that's what really solidified my interest in tarot for me. Plus, I just found it very, very accurate. I mean, I think all methods of divination can be accurate, but I think the level of detail that you get in tarot is kind of unbeaten. So my answers to these questions did not quite take us the entire way through this deck. Apologies for that. But if you have watched all the way through, big thanks. I want to thank Marilyn again, from Marilyn from Tarot Clarity, for making this tag. If you have responded to this tag, I promise I am still going through them all. I will do my very, very best to watch them all. I'm not going to be sort of tagging anyone in particular to continue on this tag, but I do strongly encourage anyone watching now who has a channel and who maybe hasn't thought of doing a response to this video tag to go ahead and do one, because I had a lot of fun, and it was a lot of fun to think about these questions. So thank you again for being here. If you're not already, please subscribe. If you are already, thanks. That's very cool of you. I hope that I will see you in the next one.